Okay, Jody Mal, please mute out. We can hear you. All right, everybody mute out, and we're all ready to start. This is the Conversation Coordinator training for the January 2019 class of Brave Leaders Plus. We are so excited. We've had over 2,000 people go through this program already. It's making a major impact in our field, both in morale, in personal growth, in leadership development, and in helping to bridge that connection between our company with a heart and our people that really want that we have a heart. So all that goes on. Okay, it's Beth Lammers. Could you mute out? Hey, Beth, could you mute out? Okay, I think she did. All right, sounds pretty quiet to me. So I've invited Catherine Lee on because she always sets the tone. She helps us to really see what our philosophy is and the real nuts and bolts of the role of the conversation coordinator. And Catherine, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Well, I have to say, as I saw the lineup of those of you coming on, and I know some others that are doing this, I am so thrilled to know that some of my people will be under your leadership, no matter who they get. I mean, just choosing who is a conversation coordinator, I know was one of the greatest honors that the company did, to look for who could they entrust with this work. And so I just want to thank KJ again and John Blair for championing this. I know we've all seen great results in our organizations because of it. So I'm just thrilled about that and honored to be here. And what I love about conversation coordinating is it really sharpens our own learning, because we want to know the material so that we can see, as our people are discussing it, do they know the material? So one of the greatest things is, we all know the greatest way to learn is to be, in a sense, the leader. But that's the crux in this. And this is where I want you to pay attention to the focus of what is a conversation coordinator, because we're not a leader. And that's very hard for those of us that are on this call, because you're all phenomenal leaders. But what we're doing is actually facilitating a conversation. And we want to remember that we are not the expert. Brene Brown is the expert, and the participants are the experts. And of course, what we're doing is coordinating the conversation so that it progresses, so that people progress. And by the way, that includes silence. Silence is part of a conversation. And I know for some of us that's uncomfortable. One of the first things I love to say to my group is, it's okay to be silent. It's okay to have moments where you allow your participants to think, so that we can get to be a friend with silence. So really, facilitation is to focus on the process, while the participants and Brene Brown bring the content. And we get the role of managing the knowledge that they've achieved during this process, both internally and from Brene Brown. So I'm going to give you just a few key differences, because again, we've been used to being the coaches, the leaders. And there's a difference, because a coach or a leader tells or gives strategy, where as a facilitator, we ask and we listen. And I think that that's really key. And I'm going to give you guys a few of my favorite questions to ask. This is because sometimes it's just asking a question, giving the space of silence, but also asking questions that dig deeper. And that's that role of a conversation coordinator. So things like, tell me more about that. Where else in life have you felt this way? That's one of my favorites. Very often you'll get these answers like, well, I don't know. One of my favorite things to do when that happens, to say, well, if you did know, what would the answer be? And you'd be amazed, 80% of people will give you an answer. And if they say, I don't know again, if they're in that 20%, after they say, I don't know, and then you say, well, what if you did know? If they say, I don't know again, being able to say, well, you know what, let's sit in silence for just a second, because sometimes in the moment you won't get it, or maybe tomorrow you'll process and you can bring it back on our Voxer group. But let's just take 30 to 60 seconds and think, if I was to give you $100 for an answer, just whatever answer you could come up with, if you did know, what would you say? And again, that 20% now will shrink to, 15% of that 20% will give you an answer. See, that's the role of a conversation coordinator, is let Brene give the content, ask her core questions, give perspective, and then you go deeper together with the group. So here are a few more things. I jot down a few of the ones. What would help you move past this? We don't want them to take their pain or the things that come up, because as Karen Jones always says, how they do life is how they'll do this business. How they do this business is how they do life. That's why this is so brilliant that we can come up with this. So being able to acknowledge the challenges, the pain, the subconscious, the patterns, whatever it is that comes up for them during this, so that they can rise up and be courageous leaders. But we don't want them to turn that pain or that insult in the past or whatever into an idol. I always say, if you ever saw The Lord of the Rings, and there's a character in it called Gollum who's obsessed with the ring, and he keeps looking at it, and he's like, precious, and he keeps looking at it, and meanwhile he's getting uglier and uglier, and he's shrinking. We don't want people to do that with their pain in this, but we want to acknowledge it and help them move past it. But we don't coach them to move past it. We ask them questions like, what would help you move past this? Has anyone else in the group ever dealt with something like this, and how did you move past it? Because the group starts to bond over them becoming the process together. It's so incredible. A question like, well, what do you think the next step should be? Not giving them the next step, that's what a coach does. But what do you think the next step should be? And even opening it up to the group. Anybody have some suggestions maybe when they were in that situation? What was the next step you took? Again, bringing that coordination of the conversation and their input. How would changing your thinking around this? If they're stuck or they're processing, how would changing your thinking around this look? How would your changing of your thinking around this bring a different result? Those are the kinds of questions that will prompt brilliant conversation. And again, referring back to Brené's work, that's why the Conversation Coordinator Guide is gold. Karen invested so much taking the content and bringing it down to referencing back to Brené's information. So saying things like, well, does anybody remember what Brené would say about this? Or what do you think Brené's philosophy would be around this? Taking them back to the content. And I love asking people, I hear that's your old story, or I hear that's your fearful story. What would your courageous story look like? Let's pretend for a minute that you're in your courageous story instead of the old story, the fearful story, the angry story, whatever it is. What would it look like on the courageous end? So just, again, flipping conversation around that. And then, is this getting you closer to what you want? I hear for some reason, this is there, it's in your life, it has happened, that it is what it is. Now, what are you going to do about it? Kind of a conversation. But you say it in a way of saying, is this getting you closer to what you want? Because that's our goal, is to move them forward in their businesses by moving them forward in their thinking. And then, of course, always saying to the group, well, what are your thoughts? Again, bringing in that conversation. So those are just a few things that I wanted to share. And again, I know that this actually will make us better coaches, because the best coaches, yes, have a strategy. We have a strategy. We have our mission-driven model. We have our playbook, the Conversation Coordinator Guide, but ultimately getting them engaged in the game in their mind, and then engaged in their game to take the activity. That's the last thing I just want to share. Is it's okay to have them have all this change in their mindset, but we all know until they put that into action. I always think of Carrie Daigle, who made a huge difference in my personal Juice Plus career, because he asked me questions and we came to a realization, and then he gave me an action step to go read a couple of books. He gave me an action step to have a couple of conversations. So when you are in this, really encouraging them to not stay in just the thinking of it, but in the action of it, because we all know that's the greatest teacher. So again, KJ and John, if he ends up listening to this, I just want to thank you for championing such a powerful work for all of us, so that we can make such a difference in this world.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I know that you're really busy and you have to hop off the call, but we always enjoy your philosophy. Thank you so much. You, of anybody, really get what it's about, to really be a facilitator and a catalyst instead of actually being directive. So thank you so much.
Great. guys.
Out, and thanks for being here. So everybody, what I'm going to do is go through the training at this point, and I'm going to leave time so that we can talk with one another. But I can't begin the training without mentioning that I noticed that Carrie Brummett has her brand new grandchild here. And we are so happy for you. I just saw the baby in the Zoom, and I've seen the baby on Facebook, and congratulations. And you can have it all, right?
Thank you. Oh my gosh, what a joy to be able to show him off to all of you. He is 1 week old today. This is Bohan and James. It's great. Thanks, Karen.
Well, it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things, then I'll share the screen and show the conversation coordinator guide. You know, being a great conversation coordinator, we have a couple of brand new people who went through the program and now are conversation coordinators, but most of you have done this for quite a bit already. Naturally, we wouldn't even be able to have a program without you. It's your dedication, your volunteering, your generosity that makes it happen. And as you know, a great conversation coordinator does a couple of things. You have the whole philosophy of what Catherine talked about, but one of your main goals is to get the pod to bond with each other so that they stay together for the 10 deep dives. And I will give us some time at the end of the call because I want to ask you for some suggestions about how we can do a better job of getting pods to stay together for the deep dives. What we've noticed now we've had, I can't remember how many groups we've had. We've had a whole bunch of corporate groups, international, global groups, and then, of course, our field groups. And what we've noticed is that when we go into the third week of the program, which starts the Brave Acts, and the Brave Acts are about getting together with the success partner, putting together strategies to invite people to join the team. And that can be done in a million ways. It can be just bringing up the product and doing it first that way, whatever. It's just about strategies. And they need to do 3 calls a week or connections or of something so that they're doing these Brave Acts. That's what translates Brené's work into reality in the Juice Plus business. And what we see is that the podsters sponsor 5 times more than their colleagues of the same level who are not in the program. That is flippin' huge. To say nothing of the other statistics like 120% higher POB and PB, a lot of things like that. Anyway, what happens is when they leave the first 8 weeks of the program and go into the deep dives, some of the pods completely fall apart. Some of them get sluggish. The accountability falls away. And even though they are still sponsoring more as a group than their counterparts not in the program, their own sponsoring drops down. So at the end of the call, I wanted to just pick your brains about that and see what I could do differently or we could do differently. But that's really the main point, to get your group to bond. So by the weekend, probably in the next 2 days, I hope, I will be sending you each emails with a list of your pod members, with their Voxers, with their cell phones, with everything. So you can put them in a Voxer chat and get that started. And then getting that started means helping them to bond. So a lot of times they will tell their stories to each other over the Voxer chat. They will share pictures of their families. They will say what they want to get out of the course. Whatever you can do to help them bond will set them up to be brave enough in the third week to do the Brave Acts. And you've probably noticed the changes so far. We don't start the Brave Acts till the third Zoom call because we really want to give them a chance to bond so they will stay accountable. I'm going to do something new this time. Every Monday, I'm going to send a Voxer message about what that week is about so that you get the backup and validation of what you're telling them and saying to them and doing with them from me. And Carrie David gave me this idea before. I did it a couple of times last session, but I'm going to do it every single week now for the 8 weeks. Then when you put them together in the Voxer chat, I'm going to send you in our Voxer chat different information, like a link to the Facebook group, and they can load each other all in there. All of you are already in there, except some of you I couldn't get in. So if you're not in there, let me know. But I couldn't, David Beavers, I couldn't get you in for some reason, and I couldn't last time either. So we'll have to see about that. But you'll have a link so they can get themselves in that group. You don't have to load them in or anything. I'll send you all the Zoom information about the launch call that we're doing in January, so that they all can be on that. I'll get you the link. It's in your conversation coordinator guide, but I'll get you another link to our micro learning center on YouTube so that they can review all the material. They can review, the launch call if they can't make it. And the last thing I wanted to say is that your other job is creating a safe environment with accountability. It's a weird kind of situation because you're not the success partner, but you've got to keep a handle on whether they're doing the deep dives or not. And in your conversation coordinator guide, you've got language about how to check in with each person, and you'll be able to tell who's not doing it and who is. It's really important to jump on that right away. Either call me so we can do a 3-way call. This was very successful last time. If someone wasn't showing up for calls, or someone wasn't doing the deep dives, or whatever was going on, the brave acts, we would say, okay, well, we have an extra support program with Karen Jones. When we want to give extra support to somebody, we make it a positive. It's not like being called in the principal's office. And we make it a positive, and then we do a 3-way Voxer where you set it up with me and the person, and you probably can drop off or whatever you want to do after that. But we help that person get the extra support they need to be able to be in the program. One of the things to remember is this is different from an informational, educational situation. In an informational Zoom call, you can be on a cell phone. You can be multitasking, have your picture up, multitask, fold laundry, whatever, because it's informational. But we are very clear on keeping a tight rein on the podsters, because lack of focus is one of the biggest problems. And it isn't even because they're lazy or something. It's because they don't value themselves enough to take this time just for them and take everything else off their plates. So we want to structure this so that they have to focus. So again, it's no putting your picture up on Zoom. It's no cell phone Zooming. You are not allowed to miss any of the 8 calls unless there is an emergency in your life. And if someone does, let me know right away. You're not tattling. You're intervening so that we can make this a successful experience for people. In therapeutic sessions, it's very structured. You can't smoke. You can't chew gum. You can't eat. You have to be there so nothing pulls you away to cover up your feelings. And in these 8 weeks, we want people's feelings to come up instead of having them push them away with distraction. So I hope I explained that really well, because I don't want to seem like a Nazi about it, but there's rhyme and reason and psychological research and theory behind why we do it this way. So maybe that'll help you to feel stronger, to hold your people in loving accountability. All right, let's see. I also want you to make a commitment for the 8 weeks to check your Voxer every day, and also to stay in contact with me if there's any questions, any issues, any problems. This is my total focus now in Juice Plus, is Brave Leaders. And I'm not stretching myself into all other things. It is my focus to make this the best program ever. And that's it so far. So now I'm going to share the screen, and we're just going to go through a couple of things about the Conversation Coordinator Guide. And here it is. How lovely. All right. How do I scroll? Lost my little scroll bar. Let's see. Okay. Whoa. I'll do that. We've got the disclaimer that you know about. We are the only people that Brene Brown has allowed to do any modification to this because our people are entrepreneurs and she doesn't have anything for entrepreneurs. But I heard some stories about some NMDs that were actually sharing the deep dives with other team members, and that's not legal. Just leave that to be. Okay. All right, so I think this is pretty close. I think everybody knows about this whole thing about what you're setting up. Whenever you have anybody that you think needs extra business coaching or something, you send them to the Freedom Revolution. And everybody knows that it starts with the, otherwise you get some other weird site. You've got some issues here that you can troubleshoot if there's any kind of issues I just talked about, missing calls or anything. Allow yourself to be able to hold people accountable and use me because I can come in as a little bit of an authority figure or whatever and take that off, that pressure off of you. You will have, I'll set you all the appendix, which gives you the Voxer guidelines, the Zoom call guidelines. You really want people to do a good job with this. Okay, what else? You have the link here for the Micro Learning Center so that anybody that isn't on this call can get this recording. Now there's a couple of things to do before the launch call. And so this week I'll be getting you everything you need to set up your pods. What we did differently this year is we took all the times that you said and we let the podsters choose an actual time slot. And so there shouldn't be a lot of, people moving back and forth because they chose exactly the time that you had available. The only problem is that some groups were so small, we had to take those people and put them into other groups to make 7 or 8 people. So you may have some people that can't make your time. I'm sending you a spreadsheet on all the conversation coordinators and all the pods that they have going, what time, and how many people are in their pod. If they have 8 people in their pod already, you can't put anybody in it. But if they have less than that, you may be able to do some switching. And I included the Voxer IDs of the other conversation coordinators, so it should be smooth. Some of you have done this for years. This was our worst thing. It was like you're like swapping people, and it was like really labor intensive for you. I hope it's better this time. You want to make sure you can even use this time period before the launch call as you're helping them bond to help them be able to really understand Zoom and Voxer and the guidelines and the etiquette. I will be sending you the Podster agreement form that they will be included in their Grow Guide, but I will be sending that to, in Voxer to you so you can talk about it together. Just remember, we're going to have a luncheon in Sacramento. It's always from 12 to 1 on Friday. It's for the conversation coordinators, the Podsters, and John Blair will be there. So we'll get John, which is always exciting for everyone. Okay, you've got the Facebook link here, but I will be sending that in Voxer for you, so all you have to do is just forward it to your own chat group. All right. One thing that confuses them is that they will have a Zoom call with you. Your very first Zoom call will be the first week of the week of January 7th. They don't have to do any online preparation for that. That is simply a get to know you, really bonding, that kind of a thing. So even though you'll be setting this up before the launch call, we'll have the launch call, your first call with them is all about the bonding and the housekeeping. Then the second Zoom call is where they start the first lesson, which is the first lesson of the 4 pillars. And sometimes they get confused, and instead of doing the first lesson of the 4 pillars, they do the first lesson of the deep dives. And they get themselves confused. So you let them know, don't do empathy, you're doing the 4 pillars that first lesson, just to see if we can circumvent any problems. In your first Zoom call, you'll always have 4 things to cover in your Zoom call. And I will give you time references to see how much time to spend on each one, just so you have an idea. Some of you have 9 people in your pod. You may talk with your group and see if you want to do a 75-minute call instead of a 60-minute call, if everyone agrees to that, because you have so many people. And then you can literally read this stuff, or you can say this stuff, whatever you want, but it really gives you an idea of how we can streamline this so everybody's saying the same thing. And you're all NMDs, and there's no way that you're all going to do something standardized. It goes against your religion. So do the best you can to standardize so everybody has the same experience. This is where you're being very clear with them about no distractions, no children, no pets. I mean, we really specify it so that they, for once in their lives, they get this hour or 75 minutes just for them. And a lot of people never have that in their life, and they experience it for the first time in Brave Leaders. Okay, so then you're kind of doing that. The next thing they do is they decide on, in that very first call, a name for the pod, and somebody, because they're all graphic wizards, volunteers to do like a graphic representation with all their pictures and post it on the Facebook group. It's very exciting for them. They do a super job. I don't even really understand how they do it, but whatever, they do it, and it looks great. Then in your conversation coordinator guide, you will always have a section at the end to prep for the next week. So you know to tell them what they're needing to do for the next week. And then you go on to the second call, which is the first lesson, and so on. I don't think I have to go through any more of this because I think you all get it. So what I'll do now is unshare. I figured out how to do that. And you have the capacity to unmute yourself so that you can comment. But if you have any comments, questions, thoughts of any nature, we'll go through that first. And then we'll talk a little bit about your ideas on how we can really do a better job of getting these pods to stay together for the deep dives. I'm ready to take notes.
Hey, Karen, this is Leanne Harris.
Hi, Leanne.
Hi, my question is this. I thought that we were to pull ourselves out of their Voxer group once they started their deep dives. If we wanted to, I did not pull myself out. I just kind of sat back and listened a little bit. How are we going to know if they're continuing to do their deep dives if we pull ourselves out of that group?
Well, Leanne, I was hoping that we could talk about this, that maybe you wouldn't get out of the chat right away. Maybe you would stay in for the first 2 or 3 months. Mm-hmm. If, I hate to impose on you guys, but it's one of the things I'm thinking about. Maybe if the conversation coordinator stayed in the chat for a few months, even though you're not leading the calls anymore or anything, you could be helping them to stay in their pods. I also thought that I would put out a weekly message on something to just give them another thing to stay in the pod, to stay connected. So if people feel comfortable with that, maybe you wouldn't have to leave the pod right away. You could stay as long as you want, or you could get out after maybe 2 months or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
I have a suggestion.
What do you think about that? Oh, go ahead, Carol.
It's worked really well for me. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it seems to have worked. And that is towards the end, I kind of self-designated a couple of people within the group that tend to be a little bit stronger in their leadership. And I sent them private answers outside of the group about the deep dive and keeping everybody together, and just really edified them and built them up and encouraged them in those skills. And I asked if it would be okay if I would touch base with them from time to time to see how things are going, and or if they ever needed me for anything. So I've continued that to this day. with my groups, even from the very first one. There's at least one person in each group that I've been ongoing communication with, just to kind of see how things are going and to provide my support. So I don't know if that's wrong to kind of pick a couple of people, but that's what I did, and it seems to be working because they take ownership then, and nobody else really in the group knows that I've done this.
Right.
So it's a little bit secretive, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I do like, first of all, what I'm hoping for is a way to secure their continuation and their deep dives without making a lot of work for you guys. So one of the things I was thinking is that when you do that integration call and, one of your last calls, that people actually are assigned a facilitator role. Like, okay, you are month one, you are deep dive 1, you are deep dive 2. And they're actually assigned that before they leave so that people know that. I don't know about, kind of calling them secretively or something. I'm not sure. But I do think that if it's assigned before they actually go into the deep dives, people know to rotate it. The actual facilitator guides are in their Grow Guides now, so they don't have to go to the Facebook page and find them. You're welcome if you can stay in the Voxer group to say, okay, this is, the first one is Susie's, and Susie's going to be working on the idea of, I think it was Empathy 1. And so the whole idea about empathy, you can load the dice a little bit with your messages in your Voxer chat. I think that would cover it pretty well. Any of you that want to keep relationships with people, that's fine. I didn't mean to insinuate that. They're very lucky to have you, that you're that dedicated, that you're still chatting with them and everything. Some of these pods, it's unbelievable. They go on family vacations together. They have really stayed together in a very deep way, which helps us as a company because sidelines are bonding instead of you stole my customer because I don't really know your sideline. So all that good stuff. But thanks, Carol. Anything else? Anybody else? So we'll go to the format of designating the facilitators for the 10 months and rotating them around.
Yeah.
Hey, KJ, I have a couple of thoughts, if
Jerry.
I may. Yeah, I think if we just do a better job of talking about the deep dives on the front end as part of the overall course, because some of the people come in with the expectation that it's just an 8-week thing and then they're out. So I made reference during the course of our 8 weeks to a deep dive. Say we were talking about something that's topically related to something in the 4 pillars. I said, you'll get into this deeper in your deep dives. And so that I set up an expectation that the deep dives would be coming. And then like Carol, I made sure that they had decided on a time and maybe even a first facilitator for that.
I love it. I think that's a great idea because the deep dives really are a deeper dive in a topic that's already been covered. So it's brilliant, and it's keeping that connection going. And I would suggest not only assigning the first facilitator, but let's assign all 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I do, Karen. Everybody works it out before, when the deep dives are coming up at the end of the other course. And I just keep the Voxer going until the next conference.
Mm-hmm.
And that way there's quite a bit of time there and then I meet them at the Brave Leaders Luncheon. And by that stage, they should be well established because they've already got their list of people who is taking each month. And, I'm kind of hopping in every now and then, checking that they're still talking, etc. So anyway,
that makes a lot of sense, Rosie. Rosie and Kim Douglas are literally the people that had the most groups because they've had 2 at a time sometimes. So you've got a lot of practice with this, so I definitely...
You learn along the way, right?
Exactly. Mike Ewell, did you want to say something? It looks like you unmuted.
Yeah, Jerry stated what I was going to state, the obvious, but, talking to one of our podsters at the last conference, he shared with me that basically I shared that I was missing him in the deep dives, and he said, I signed up for the 8 weeks. I really didn't commit to that. And I think, as Jerry said, just letting them know up front that, that 8 weeks is really the foundation for the deep dives. And I think as Jerry said, stating it up front and building that throughout the 8 weeks is going to be key.
You know, it's so helpful to get, it's always, whenever I talk to NMDs, I find out what's really going on in anywhere, whether it's our business or whether it's Brave Leaders. I had no idea that people didn't think that there was a continuation after the 8 weeks. This is like news to me. So perfect. Thank you for letting me know. NMDs, you always give me good information. I will, even in my messaging, make sure that people understand that, because who knew?
I think too, KJ,
Hey, KJ.
of No One Left Behind, with us laying the groundwork from the very beginning of No One Left Behind, that's usually where I bring the deep dive in, that this is, you know, 8-week course designated for this, and you get to carry these relationships on. And then I share my own experience, like I'm still in my own deep dive and the amazing relationships I have with my sideline NMDs and how we just build each other up. So that whole No One Left Behind thing carries through.
Okay.
Baron, I have a thought.
I hear David Beavers, and then we'll go on to this other person on the phone.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, David, go for it.
I'm thinking of two things, and they've been mentioned. One is just let's reframe the whole program. We've already done it, I think, but really with clarity that this is a one-year deal. Just make it that when they join, it's a one-year deal. And the second thing is, I've always dropped off maybe a couple of weeks after the initial 8 weeks, and like most of you, they're very sad to see me go. Right? I think I could stay on that Zoom call, and then we could be a conduit for you, Karen, once a week or twice a month to send a message through us to them about what they should be experiencing, what their expectations are for this month's deep dive, kind of like you're going to be doing with us weekly. So those are two things I think that would keep me. I don't want to be, obviously, I don't want to be the facilitator during the deep dives. That's not my job. But I wouldn't mind being a conduit for your focus.
Right.
So frame it for a year, and then I'll hang in there with them for at least, 3 or 4 more months, if not the rest of the year, as long as I'm not the leader, but just the conduit.
Yeah, and that way I can send a message to the conversation coordinator Voxer chat, and you can forward it to your group.
That's right.
Okay. Great ideas. Somebody's on the phone that was trying to say something.
That was me, KJ.
Oh, Loretta.
Two thoughts that I had. One is, I wonder if you've done an analysis of those not going on to do deep dives or the sales coordinators that were in Fast Track. I'm very grateful that we've opened this up to some of our more long-term, proven tracked, committed individuals, because I think as we go up the marketing plan, our level of commitment to ourselves and personal growth and the business are growing. So just would be curious to know, because our whole pod, all NMDs, all went on to be part of the deep dives. There wasn't any question. Also, want to say super important, in my opinion, is the whole person who's distracted, not following through, logging on via their phone, seeing half in. I think they are a real hindrance to the success of this program. And I'm grateful that you're getting that addressed up front, because I noticed they didn't go on to that individual in our pods did not go on to deep dives. I think there's a correlation if you're not committed during the first tee up. And I think maybe removal of people from the program up front might be something to think about.
Well, we actually do that. Our first intervention is to provide the kind of support that someone can love themselves enough to give them this time without distraction. It's usually a case of self-worth that allows people to be so ADD-ish with their attention span. And you don't really, they're starting out a program that's going to help them with their self-worth, but they're not there yet. And so we're asking them to have behaviors that indicate they value themselves when they don't yet. And so we want to give them that extra support in the beginning. And that's why I think some conversation coordinators feel like they're tattling. But if you let them miss one time, or if they're on the phone one time, it has to be addressed, because it ruins their whole experience. And you're right. The people who don't really commit will certainly not commit when we take the accountability mechanism out. So you're right about all that stuff.
KJ, and everybody, one thing I think that could help too is if NMDs of people going through the program really emphasize the whole program. And I'll say this because this program has changed my team culture. I had some challenges with a couple of individuals that were impacting the whole team. And I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am for the transformation that has occurred. It's remarkable. So for me, it's not just the success partners and not just from corporate hearing this, but from those of us who are building organizations that are leading, that their support team can really put in some phenomenal words about how great this program is. So that's another idea.
You're absolutely right, and you're bringing up sort of the elephant in the room, and that is that I really thought to myself, if I was still a national marketing director and I had a team member who wanted to spend 5 weeks with me, calling at least 3 people a week to build my team, that I would be in heaven, because that's what I want from my team members. It would be like I know who to work with. It isn't translating quite that way with the other success partners. So focusing on their commitment, their understanding, and their time in a very strong way, I think I'm going to do a really strong job on that as well.
And that may lead to thinking about too, one of the challenges of why don't people continue with the 3-way calls and with those connections. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is we live in a world, I don't think it's just our business culture, just confined to us, but we live in a world where there's so many distractions. Social media is great and it's hard. People get lost in the hole. And I think that when we keep it super simple, if we go back to simplicity, that how we build our business is conversation by conversation.